Welcome to day 2 of UTS Open Education Week. For those who don't know me, my name is Mace Fatayr. I'm the UTS Open Education Week program lead, and I work at UTS as Manager Learner Experience Design. I'm joined today by my colleague David Yeats. David Yeats from the Open Education Organizing team. David and I will be co-facilitating today with our chair from Latrobe University, Stephen Chang. And I'll introduce Stephen to you in a minute. Quick housekeeping, we will be recording this session and making it available under Creative Commons license after the event. So if you prefer not to appear in the recording, please keep your camera off while asking questions. Captioning and transcript are both available and enabled, so be able to turn it on during this session. Stephen will be chairing this session. I'll do a quick acknowledgement of country, but before I introduce Stephen, as we always start, I'd like to start with acknowledging the country that I'm joining from today. On behalf of the organizing team of Open Education Week, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral land our campuses now stand. I would like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for these lands. I would like also to remind you that the colonization that happened in history in North America and Australia is still happening to date, yet the lesson is not being learned. The settler colonization of the lands of Palestine, the oppression that Palestinians have been enduring for the last 76 years, and the genocide that is still happening in front of our eyes till this moment. I would like to invite you also to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which you live and work, and please feel free to do so in the chat. Our chair for today is a very dear colleague and also friend from Latrobe University, Stephen Chen. Stephen is the coordinator of Open Education and Scholarship at Latrobe University. Stephen is the co-convener of the Open Education Practices Escalade Special Interest Group, and as a co-author and has co-authored the chapter called Aligning Open Education Programs with Academic Rewards and Recognition in the Open Education Down Under Australian Case Studies, a recent publication. I'll hand over now to Stephen to introduce our wonderful speakers. Over to you, Stephen.
Hey everyone, good morning to fellow Australians and Australasians, and good evening to our guest speakers. Fantastic to have you here today to speak to us. So thought I'd start with just a brief background, I guess, to this, that, you know, assessment reform has been a really hot topic in higher education for a long time, decades, but recently it's been made even more spicy and urgent by the emergence of generative AI in learning and teaching, and the kind of cracks that has exposed in assessment practices. And in Gen AI has really kind of pushed assessment from emphasizing outputs to prioritizing, you know, learning processes and pedagogy. And those of us in Australia will have noticed this shift has prompted quality assurance organizations like TEXA to increasingly require higher education institutions to show, you know, how are they securing assessments to mitigate these new threats. But even though there's all these growing discussions around assessment security, integrity and redesign, there hasn't been that much attention given to open pedagogy, let alone renewable assessment. And, you know, the literature and practices demonstrate pretty significant value of things like student-generated OERs and renewable assessments. So this session is really aiming to provide all of you with practical strategies that you can put into action at your own institution, that you can develop and implement more authentic assessments using open educational practices. So hopefully you'll walk away with an understanding of the role of open pedagogy in designing authentic assessments, hear two methods in doing this, and start deciding or planning how you can use this approach in your own learning and teaching context. And we'll also have time for Q&A after we hear from both our speakers. Before I introduce Virginia and Julie, let's do a little bit of an activity first. And that is basically, how would you define renewable assessment? And feel free to share your definition or your understanding in the chat. Even if you barely have an understanding, or maybe you haven't heard of it before, feel free to say that as well. I think that might be helpful. Okay, so David's had a go. Assessment that lives on. And some haven't heard of the term before, which is absolutely fine. And that's why that's why we're here. Student creations that have value beyond the class. So there's a theme here, I guess, emerging of, value of precious work continuing beyond the end of a semester or a course, that they're not just thrown in the bin, which kind of has been the default practice for decades. Jenny's assessment that students can adapt to benefit their context and personal experience. Yeah, I like that one. Yep, nice. Extended life for the assessment beyond the end of academic semester. And the pride that students have to be associated with their own work, and building on that, Dimity's suggested that these can be used to collaborate or reach with external partners, or when students go to work in the workforce after doing the course, they have something that they can bring from their study into that and put into practice or share with their new colleagues. And Anne suggests the name seems to imply that they can be reused, but I would guess that they are modified or adapted. Yeah, I think all of the above are possible. So yeah, great. Thanks everyone. I think that's a really good range of different angles on how it works, value. Yeah, Usha, sustainable assessment that can be recycled without compromising on the quality of student experience and beyond the reach of ChatGPT. Yeah, right. So the AI part as well, kind of facing up to that significant challenge. All right. Thanks everyone for participating in that little exercise. Might move on now to introduce. So today we've got both Dr. Virginia Clinton-Lissel and Dr. Julie Lazara. And I'll actually let them introduce themselves rather than reading out long bios. So yeah, take it away, Virginia.
Okay. Hi, I'm Virginia Clinton LaSalle, and I'm an associate professor of educational foundations and research at the University of North Dakota in the United States.
And hello, my name is Julie Lazara, and I'm psychology faculty through Maricopa Community Colleges. Specifically, I'm at Chandler Gilbert Community College in Phoenix, Arizona in the US.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And also thank you for staying up a bit late in your evening to present to us. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah, Virginia, did you want to kick off your presentation?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, just Okay. And sorry, I'm gonna switch screens because I'm not crazy about how that one is looking. While I'm doing that, I did want to comment. I thought the ChatGPT comment was interesting because I was initially asked to do a workshop on my campus because of concern about ChatGPT and the idea that open pedagogy could be a workaround for it. And I do agree that open pedagogy is probably more motivating, and when students are motivated, they're less likely to cheat. But this presentation I'm actually going to give is about using ChatGPT ethically in research. Okay. Okay, let's do this. All right. So this is an example of an open pedagogy assignment that you can opt to have students use ChatGPT or another generative writing AI product with in a child development course. So just some background first. This is an introductory course. My students are mostly first-year students. Most of them are pre-service teachers, elementary education, secondary education, the works. And I usually have between 40 and 60 students a term. And this is an assignment to write a fictional vignette about a child with a psychological disorder. The reason why I have students do this is when we cover development, we touch a little bit on atypical development, but because child development is such a big topic, the focus is really typical development. So this is a chance for students to really dive into a particular disorder and learn more about it. And in this, the use of ChatGPT was optional for portions of the assignment, but students were required to write their own reflections about the experience, and they were not allowed to use ChatGPT for that. And I'm going to go through each of the steps I had my students do. The first step was a concept map. So I had the students use what's known as the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. They had to use that and learn how to find it. This is considered the definitive guide for what makes something a disorder in the United States. You cannot get treatment authorized if you do not have a code number from this book that says that this is the disorder that is being treated. And lists out the criteria that need to be met for a diagnosis. And the reason for this was to make sure that that students were understanding that children get diagnosed with disorders because there's this very specific, very scientific process of understanding what the criteria are for diagnosis and whether or not a child meets that diagnosis. The other thing that this concept map did is I really wanted to emphasize that children with disorders are children. They're more than just the disorder. So I wanted them to think about other aspects of the child. So here is what this concept map looked like. They got to name their kid. And this part that they were supposed to do on their own, not use any AI tools or anything like that. But come up with the demographics, name, the hobbies, who's in the child's family. And I told them the boxes are this size, but make them bigger, smaller, however, just this needs to be all completed. And also to talk about the child's developmental milestones. So depending on their age, like, let's say we're talking about a 1-year-old, when did they learn to walk? When did they learn to talk? Those kinds of milestones. And then they had to use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual and state what the disorder was and the number. And this was to make sure that they actually used the manual because then they were getting the correct, it was more likely that they were getting the correct and accurate information. To assist with this, they not only had the manual, but in the assignment sheet, I had links to a lot of good resources about a variety of disorders. So here's some examples. Here's a student who had their child diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This was a particularly lengthy one. Some people really went into detail about their imaginary child and about their family, and here that this is a lot of detail about the family and what they like to do. And then here they had to go through each of the criteria for the disorder and write out what symptoms the child had that were indicative of the disorder. And I told them it was really important that they worked out all these details because ChatGPT and other generative AI is often inaccurate with the exact symptoms. So I wanted them to make sure they had that information accurate. Here's another one. This is Trevor. This one's not as detailed. This is a little more typical. And then I explained how to use ChatGPT in class. And I showed the students examples of inaccuracies and hallucinations. My favorite is I showed how I asked it to write a faculty bio about me, and it wrote about an imaginary professor of my name at a different institution who studied neuroscience. It was pretty far off from what I actually do. I also talked about the importance of prompting and putting in suggestions for prompts and gave them some examples of prompts. So here was an example. I also made a point of showing students how you have to fact check what generative AI gives you. It is not a good source. And here's an example is, I asked, how long do children need to show symptoms of depression? If you look at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it's very clear that if there's, you need a minimum of 2 weeks. However, ChatGPT said there's no specific time frame, which is clearly wrong. So then I had the students send me their ChatGPT notes, and here's some examples of that. Here's one where they sent me different patterns. So I need to come up with characteristics for a girl with OCD by this name. How might this affect her family? And then not all of my students use ChatGPT. I told them if they didn't use ChatGPT to instead just send me their notes. And this is an example of the notes one of my students took, which, by the way, they're beautiful. I wish I took notes like this. So based on what they did with ChatGPT or their own note-taking, they were told they needed to craft these fictional descriptions. And I wanted to think about it from a parent's perspective. What it would be like to be a parent for this fictional child. And there'd be an introduction with some background on the children, the child's characteristics. This part they were told to be, very careful to double check that what they were writing about was actually what the child, what the criteria involved, and then a scenario. And ultimately, the goal for this was to have some examples of stories that students could read about and share in order to have some materials available for other students to learn from. Because there's just a lack of personal touch or a lack of thinking about what it would be like or having that viewpoint of having the experience of raising a child with a psychological disorder in a lot of the materials I could find. And I felt like something like this would really be valuable for future students in the course. So students needed to submit first draft, and then they were graded on peer-reviewed feedback. Then the final drafts were submitted. And here are my experiences. A lot of students really checked and were very nervous about using ChatGPT. They were really worried that I was going to somehow change it. Students also double checked that they didn't have to use it. I tried to be clear that it wasn't required, but it was just an option. In general, students seem to have a hard time doing the prompting. They would put in something, and then if the output wasn't right, they didn't understand that they could put in prompts to change it. As far as the benefits of using ChatGPT, they liked that it helped them think about what it would be like, to help give them ideas about what it would be like to be the parent of a child with a psychological disorder. It also seemed that students just really appreciated having this opportunity, this mental exercise, and also the opportunity to create materials that future students could use. Students also said that the scenario component, where they would be writing about like how the experience of having the disorder helped a lot with brainstorming. So for students, comments on the advantages of using ChatGPT, they said it helped with ideas and creativity, vocabulary, that it saved time, it was practical. And this one made me happy. They said that it taught them the importance of fact checking and to see if they were using it appropriately. And they said it helped them understand like the big picture of the assignment, and also to give the parents' point of view, because, being young college students for the most part, very few of them were parents themselves. So it helped them with that imaginary exercise of what it would be like. So the disadvantages, a lot of them complained that the information may be inaccurate. And a lot of them commented that, frankly, it was almost easier just to write it than it was to ask for ChatGPT to write things, and then they would check it. They also found that prompt writing was harder than they thought. I think there was this idea of like, oh, it's supposed to just write my paper for me and it's done. But no, you actually have to work with it. So that was a win for me. You actually have to put effort into using AI appropriately, which was a goal of this assignment. That they found a lot of them are just like, it just didn't feel right. Like, they would say, I know you told me I could do this, but I felt like I was doing something wrong. They also said that it could help with brainstorming, but not for final submissions, which again, this was a goal. This was yes, these tools are helpful for brainstorming and for getting ideas, but for your final submission, you need to go through, clean it up, and make it the way it needs to be. And some students said that they just ended up not using any ChatGPT output because it didn't work for what they were doing. Here's some reflections. So at the end, they were asked to reflect on the process. Part of it was to reflect on what was it like imagining being a parent of a child with a disorder, or, if you are one, how did this feel? And this part was, what was it like using ChatGPT? And if you did not use ChatGPT, why not? And I thought these were some really good points. You end up spending a lot of times fact checking, and you could just write it yourself. And it just doesn't have that emotional connection. And there was a certain artificial feel with some of the output I saw. Here are some comments that I thought was pretty interesting. That one of my favorites was, I know it's absurd, but I'm scared it will take over the world one day. Anyway, if you are interested in these directions, I have them included in a faculty guide on renewable assignments. And this covers a wide variety of assignments on open pedagogy. It is Creative Commons licensed. You can use this very long link, which I can drop in the chat, or you can scan it here. And I will stop there to make sure there's plenty of time for Julie.
Thanks, Virginia. That was really awesome. And
Thank you.
I love some of the themes that came out of that around, genuine authenticity of the assessment design, encouraging students to, oops, my camera's back on now. Getting them to critically engage with AI just as they would, potentially in clinical practice. So, and also the creativity. Sounds really interesting to get it started from the perspective of imagine your child in the world. And also some hope, I think, looking at those critical reflections of your students on what they think of ChatGPT. I can see a lot of hope in that. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you.
And let's build on the insights that Virginia's provided by hearing from Julie. Take it away, Julie.
All right, hello. And I'm laughing that I put the backdrop on. Is it inverted for everyone? Is this because I'm in the US and you all are in Australia? I don't know, but there's the
That looks
background.
good, Julie.
Looks fine.
Okay. I do appreciate Virginia's talk, and when we were talking about presenting, I heard about her assignment and I already said immediately, I want to try that. And she shared the assignment directions because I think it would be perfect for a Psych 101 class, especially an online class. So I think that's the great part. One of the great parts of open education is being able to share these assignments with each other and hearing how it went for one person and then building on that and trying it yourself. So I'm looking forward to trying it. Back to our little mini survey about renewable assignments and who knew about it and who didn't. I'm going to go into a little bit of a definition. So for those of you who are new to it, can give some more clarification on what exactly it is. So next slide, please. I have a magical slide person for me. Okay, thank you. So the first question I want to ask you all, and if you want to answer in the chat as well, how do we assess students? So what typically comes to your mind? This picture looks like it's from the 90s. This could have been maybe me in high school. When you think about how, if you've been teaching for a while, in the past, assessment, I would think about, and tell me if you think about anything else, in-person exams, Scantrons, essays, in-class presentations, handouts, so more physical copies of things that you are distributing. And over time, we've moved to the online space. And of course, since the pandemic, things changed even more. People were forced to go online who didn't want to go online, and our assessments had to switch with that. I remember in my department, there were still people using Scantrons. Do you all use Scantron? Did you use Scantrons in Australia? I'm curious, or maybe they were called something else. But I was surprised to see that there were still Scantrons around and big expensive Scantron machines that would go down, and students would just fill in the bubble, and that's how they would take their test. I remember in college this happening too. You would get a score response and it would just show you which ones were incorrect. You would get it maybe a week later, and that was your assessment. Now, as we move forward, our assessments have changed, I think, for most of us. And I think some people use your learning management system or online submission for everything. You don't even want something that's handed in. Imagine getting a student's essay written by hand and trying to read their handwriting. And sometimes when I do in-class assignments, I do have students write by hand, and then I look at it and I have a really hard time reading it. So we've changed where now we submit through the LMS. We have automatic grading, a lot of multiple choice questions, online homework systems, probably less of that in this group since we are people interested in open education. But a lot of the textbook publishers are trying to sell you on, here's an online platform that does everything for you. You as the instructor, you're almost obsolete. You may not even need to be there because everything can be managed through this online platform. Depending on what learning management system you use, we use Canvas. I've used Blackboard in the past, but you could do discussion boards. You can do some other things depending on your online management system. And there's a lot that you can do for free. And what's been interesting, I think, is even if you have an in-person class, that instructors still prefer students to submit online because it's easier, you're not losing papers, you're keeping everything organized, and you know that the student submitted it. It's just a lot cleaner to do it that way, and then to give the written feedback, and like I said, with the handwriting. So in the chat, if you want to put any other ideas of assessments that maybe I missed that you've done in the past or things that you're doing now with the changing world. And Virginia really touched on this a lot. Sometimes instructors are really worried about cheating, and then also students are worried about cheating. I think with generative AI, a lot of times we say chat GPT, but there's so many different types of generative AI that students can use that they might be afraid to cheat. And also instructors are trying to catch students cheating. So you may have heard of people using like a plagiarism detector. There's AI detector. They may not always be that accurate. You don't want to accuse a student of doing something. The other thing that's difficult for students is that the policy differs between instructors, where in a class like Virginia, they are told to use generative AI. And then they might go to another instructor's class. And then in that class, they say, if you use this, it's counted as plagiarism. This is academic dishonesty. So I think it can be confusing for students to really think about, who is the professor? Is it okay or not? What I started doing in some of my assignments, and I tried this out, I'm curious if anyone has done this before or thought about it. I just had students add a little disclosure statement at the end, and they need to put if they used AI, generative AI, and how they used it. So it's kind of like an honors code. I used it, I verified that I'm giving the okay on what the submission is, and they're allowed to use it. I just want them to cite it if they did and be honest with it. So that's another approach. The other thing to think about with assessments, besides are students cheating and is it our job really to catch them, is are students just completing assignments just to get it done? So sometimes we have online classes and you'll get the student that wants to accelerate so fast. They're trying to get it in as soon as possible. They're submitting almost faster than you can grade it. Are they really learning? And then one thing that you could do is try to hold back. Don't publish all the modules ahead of time. You could try to scaffold it that way. But we don't want students just to check the box, just get it done, click through, guess. We're hoping that we see some learning, that students remember the class. Another exercise that I do at the end of the semester is to ask students, either in an in-class discussion or just like in their own evaluation of the course, what did you learn in this course that you're going to remember 10 years from now? And it's interesting to see what they say. And some of them are like, well, hopefully everything. We know that is not realistic, but I want to know what's really going to stick with them. What is their takeaway? What did they do in this class that they could, like we were talking about the beginning, be proud of, share with, that they can show someone, look at what I did in this class, and here it is. You can find it on the internet. and it's good and it's high quality work. So I think that there's some benefit in that, especially when students they're looking for a job. I actually had a student today that came up to me and said, you know, I want to get a job and start working in the field of psychology, but I don't have that much experience. And what can I put on my resume? I have nothing to put on my resume. And what if, as a part of their resume, they could link to an assignment that they did, that they can show this work, that they can show a book, that they can show this assignment that had impact, and that they can talk about it. So that's where we're going. Next slide, please. So here's the lovely chart that I think helps explain the difference between disposable versus renewable and the steps along the way. So when you think of a disposable assignment, it sounds so terrible, but a lot of times you turn in something. If we think about, we spend hours and hours writing this paper, and then we turn it into our instructor. They read it, we get a grade, and then it's just like thrown in the garbage. Maybe you keep it, but no one's really seen it. It's just you and the instructor, and that's it. And we just think about how much time was spent that could be used maybe for some other good. So that's where we move to the next stage, is authentic assignments. And I think a lot of us try to do this naturally because we want the assignment to not just be busy work. So in the second stage, the artifact has value beyond supporting its creators' learning. And this could be even like sharing in a discussion board or peer review, something where more people are seeing this besides just the instructor and the student. There's something else going on. And then the next one, constructionist assignment, the added layer is the artifact is made public. So then more people are going to see, and it's kind of debatable if you would say, is a classroom a public forum or not? It's semi-public. And then if you can get to the last stage, if you meet all of these, this is what we call renewable assignments, and then the artifact is openly licensed. So in addition to being public, it has the Creative Commons licensing, so people are able to use the 5 R's to remix, to redistribute, to use as they see fit, and have this item that lives on and that others can use in learning. So one of the challenges in deploying renewable assignments is getting a little bit of the student buy-in from it, because sometimes students say, well, I just want to write an essay and be done. What is all this new stuff that you're telling me? And you have to explain to them the reasoning behind, you could use this in the future. This is going to impact other people. Just explain your reasoning. The other important part of this, and you may see some research on this too, is giving students the option of if they do want their work to be openly licensed or not. So if something's very personal, you don't want to ask them to do a personal reflection and then that has to be shared publicly. That wouldn't be appropriate. So students still are the last ones that get to say, yes, it's okay for this to be public, or no, it's not. I think that choice is a really important part of it. And they should know that at the beginning of the assignment, and then who's really the owner of the work at the end. That's another question to think about. Next slide, please. So I want to share one assignment with you. And this assignment, so this was a part of a fellowship with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm curious if you all have heard of the 17 goals before. And this fellowship was encouraging faculty across disciplines. And this fellowship, I believe, is still going on if you're interested. And you were to work with this other faculty member and choose a goal that aligned with your class. For me, it was a faculty that was a nursing faculty, and we had the shared assignment where students were going to work on this book. So for phase one, students collaborate in groups. They were working in groups, and then they were to write a chapter for this mental health well-being guidebook. And they had to include openly licensed research and local resources as well. They needed to use H5P, so this is an interactive tool within Pressbooks. I believe you can use it in Canvas and some other LMSs as well. So they needed to have an interactive part to it just so the book wouldn't be too static. And then in phase three, there was peer feedback. I also gave them feedback on their chapter before it went live and was completely public. And then they ended up with a final product. So can you click on that top link up there, the final product and detailed assignment instructions? Thank you. So this is an example, just scroll down a little bit so you can just kind of see. So this lists what their assignment was. So if you want all the details of the assignment, I'm sharing my slides with you, so you have all the links of it too. But you can go and you can see this book that is available for anyone. And I actually had somebody reach out to me. You never know with open education who it's going to reach. And a father reached out to me because there was a section on driving and safety, and he was saying, I found your book and I came across this section that talked about the importance of not texting while driving, and I thought it was really beneficial for my daughter when she was learning to drive. And I just thought, that's pretty cool. That would be neat for my students who made this a few years ago to know that people are still finding it and using this resource. If you scroll back up to the top, let me see if you can see the, so if you click on where it says contents. Okay, yes, so you can see there's a bunch of other assignments here too by other instructors who are in this fellowship. So if you're interested, you can look at the different goals. Our SDG goal was the good health and well-being, but then other people had other SDG goals. So it's interesting. You can see their assignment, what they did with it. And if you go back to the slides, the video, I won't make you, it's a video within a video. I won't make you watch this video, and I cringe at seeing the still of myself right there. But part of this fellowship, we made these videos, which are openly licensed. And I talk about my experience as the faculty member. And then if you go a little bit further, it's a 3-minute video. One of my students talks about her experience in being a part of the assignment. So I think that's pretty cool. And then if you see that link on the bottom, that's back to that book where you can see it. No, actually, this is other videos. If you want to see other videos of students and faculty sharing, you can click there and see what they said. Next slide, please. If you are looking for renewable assignment examples, I think it can be difficult at first to start and say, well, I'm not sure what to do. I don't have any ideas. So I think we know in our community, we're all open to sharing. And here's a few places that you can go to look at examples of open assignments. And most of them are going to be licensed with a Creative Commons. So they want you to use it and to modify and adapt. So the first one I found, if you go there, you can see, and this was from 2017, 2018, but some assignments still could be relevant today. The second under B is that fellowship that I told you about, and they made a toolkit with all of the assignments. So this has been going on for a few years. These all connect back to the UN SDGs, but there's still other ways that you can adapt these assignments. The link below is another repository that has additional assignments. You can look there. And then under C is, if you recognize the names Virginia also was a co-author with me on this study, but we were looking at renewable assignments and comparing faculty and student perceptions. So if you're interested, you can look at that research. And it was very kind of a toe dip into this area. And I hope other people will continue on in this research and try to gather more. That's one thing in working in a community college. We have small classes, which is great for teaching, but for doing research, it is a very small sample size. But sometimes we think that we are doing this great thing and we think it's so valuable, but we want to know what do students think. So take a look and you can see what you think there. And then indeed, there's another great resource from the Open Education Network, even just for looking at materials to find textbooks is a good place to look. And there's faculty reviews. You can do a peer review on there as well. But this particular link will take you to more open pedagogy assignments. Next slide. Okay, I think that's it. And I think we're to the point of both Virginia and I taking questions, but I'm happy to speak with you further. You can connect with me on email or LinkedIn, and would love to collaborate.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, a lot really interesting themes came out of that around authenticity of the design, the honor code system, and getting students to think 10 years ahead, all of that, and the ethics, ownership, sharing, making their own choices in ways that can really matter for them. So yeah, really interesting points. Thanks. Let's go to open Q&A now. So if anyone wants to ask Virginia or Julie a question, feel free to unmute your mic and ask away. While we're waiting for people to think of questions, there were a couple in the chat. One was from Wendy Taleo, was around, I guess you're thinking, Virginia, I think, around how explicitly to say the goals that you as the educator are thinking, how explicitly to articulate that to the student. Did you want to talk through that at all?
Yes, yeah. So I replied to Wendy, but just to share a little bit, I guess my goals regarding AA specifically ended up staying inside thoughts, because I didn't want students to feel like they had to use AI. I was very upfront when I went over ChatGPT that there's privacy issues and there are other issues involved. And I completely understood if they didn't feel comfortable agreeing to let their data be used or had any qualms with it. So I didn't want students to feel pressured. And I felt like if I had put a goal that specifically said, I want you to learn how to use AI correctly and ethically, then they might have been like, well, I thought I didn't have to use AI. How am I supposed to learn that if I don't? So I just really focused on the goals regarding the actual assignment, independent of AI.
Yeah, cool.
I do see a question in the chat that was addressed to me about, with regards to assessing student submissions, is the use of AI, essay grader type systems in common practice? Where will this lead in your opinion? I think this is really interesting because you'll ask some people, have you used AI before? And they think if they haven't used ChatGPT, they haven't used AI. But really, in so much, it's already integrated. So one of the arguments, even if you're using Grammarly, Even sometimes the lower editions of it, there'll be some aspect of AI. Even in writing emails, it'll say suggested prompts for you to say that's AI. And I think that there is something to helping instructors, grading and doing some of the work so we can have time to do the most important things. The point to me is make sure you don't lose the human experience. And that's, I think Virginia was talking about that too. We don't want to make ourselves obsolete. So as long as the human is still there, that's important, because otherwise these programs can teach the classes for us. How are we going to put that human part? And the same thing for students. Don't make yourself obsolete. Where's the human part of what you are submitting? So if you do have an AI grader, make sure you're still going in and reviewing it. Make sure you're still writing some comments to your students, use their name, that sort of thing. So I don't think it's going anywhere. We're going to use it, but I like to think of it as AI is like our teaching assistant, and they can help us do some of those things that we don't like to do, so we have time to do the more important things.
I have a
Yeah, and the guide I put earlier was like my overall guide to for faculty for open pedagogy / renewable assignments, and has a bunch of different examples and links. But if you don't feel like digging through there to find this specific assignment, I just added that one here.
Thank you for sharing that and your experience. I have a question for both of you, if that's all right. I'm always keen to learn more about how academics introduce the concept of Creative Commons license to their students, and how, if at all, their understanding kind of evolve or change during the semester. So once we get to the end of the semester and see what they have produced, does that change?
So I wasn't, this is kind of a disappointing answer, but I would say that the majority of my students opted not to license their work at all. And the students who did the CCO, so they would be anonymous. I have very few students who chose a license. I did go into like, I did suggest like, here are 2 different licenses. If you want your name on it, choose this one. If you don't, choose this one. And if you would like to learn more about Creative Commons licensing, here is a helpful video. And I've done this with a few assignments with this group, but I think sometimes students just feel like it's one more thing that they have to learn, and it's hard to really follow why it's a core concept. Like, yeah, sure, you can use my assignment, but why do I have to learn about licensing? I'm like, well, don't you want credit? And I have tried pitching it as getting credit for your work. And what I'm going to try next time I do this with my class is when they submit their final assignment, they're going to be asked with their submission, like, do you want credit? And then, if so, or are you willing to share this? And if so, anonymous or with your name. And then, are you okay with this license? And with those details. So, I think a lot of students that I have had it drilled into their head that you do not want to have a footprint on the internet. And they are very nervous about having their name on something, even if it would be something that could be used in a positive way. Like, this is something they could show a future employer, or they could share, have some pride in. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a difficult topic. because you do, in addition to teaching your content, then you're going to teach this license. And it's not like you can just teach it in one day. I think if you are going to use it, it has to be scaffold. When I did this project, it was for an honors class. So that's some of the buy-in. If it's an honors project, you have to learn this additional part and give them little bits each time. And the same thing, this is something that they're working on the entire semester in my assignment. So they're getting little pieces, they're getting feedback, and then they have the project at the end. And that goes back to the point about renewable assignments versus disposable, where I think sometimes the busy work, more disposable assignments, you just do it quickly, you turn it in, that's it. This is something that you're taking the whole semester, you're getting peer feedback, you're getting instructor feedback. So hopefully they feel more comfortable in the end sharing it. But it is interesting that they sometimes feel comfortable sharing on social media and everything else, but not when it comes to their academic work.
I think a lot of times they think what they post on social media is like private or only their friends can see.
Right.
Yeah, but
Thanks, Paul. That's very interesting to hear.
I will say that I've done research with other people's classes and with students who are more advanced and where it was a similar project, like Julie explained, where they worked on it the whole semester rather than it was one assignment. It was like their whole course was spent working on this particular project. And we found about 2/3 of students opted to publicly share and Creatively Commons license their work. Part of that project that I was on, they had a librarian working with them about Creative Commons licensing to make sure that they really understood it.
One other assignment idea I wanted to share is, in addition to the guidebook, I've had students just work on improving our own textbook. So they don't necessarily have to put their name on it, or you could put the whole class on there, because a lot of times they will have feedback like, well, this, I remember for one chapter, it was for developmental psychology, and these students were supposed to look like they were in their 20s, and they were like, that is not how students dress anymore. Like, okay, let's find a picture that's more appropriate. Or they could take pictures on campus and use their own photography, that sort of thing. So I think improving a textbook could be something that they see that value for, and maybe there's a little bit more, they don't have to, it's not all their original work, they're just editing and making it a little bit better.
Yeah, thanks guys for those answers around that, because I think it illustrates that there's, complex emotions, complex kind of preconceived ideas around these things, but that those can be, I guess, mediated by scaffolding. So I think that's really valuable to think about. We are running out of time, so I'll just wrap up and say thanks to both of you. I thought I'd also share a cheeky plug for Maze's paper on student-generated OERs, which I've put in the chat, published, I was going to say last year, but 2023. Yeah, that was a collaboration between UTS and University of Southern Queensland. So if people are looking for a Australasian local example, please check that out. It's got some parallels. It's also a two case studies joined together paper. So have a look at that. And I will now pass to Mace to close the session.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stephen. I didn't expect that, but thank you so much. Yeah, that was wonderful, another wonderful session. I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you to the audience who stayed until this minute, and also special thanks to Virginia and Julie for sharing your expertise. That was really inspiring, and we've learned a lot from your experience. It's really valuable perspectives that you shared with us. And also thank you for David, Jenny, Helen, Scott, who've been facilitating these sessions with us. Many thanks to Stephen Chen. It was wonderful to have you chairing the session with us today. Would like to remind you, David, I'm sure you put the link to the rest of the program. So tomorrow we have another session with Helen Chen from the library. She'll talk to open textbooks authors and who are going, excuse me, to showcase and show and tell their work in open textbooks. You will have the opportunity to also experience Pressbooks tomorrow, to play with the platform. And we also have another special guest, Ash Baba from Cole, who will be sharing with us some updates. The Thursday session, we're also going to have Stephen with us on the panel. David Yates will be talking to Stephen and Suzanne and Julian Paquet and Amanda White about how open education supports academic recognition. So I encourage all of you to join these two sessions. We're going to wrap up the week with an interesting and a very burning topic about the intersection between open education and learning design, where we have Jenny Wallace chairing the session and talking to learning designers and people with instructional design experience, as it's called in the US. And we hope you continue to join us and enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Virginia. We'll stop the recording. Thanks, Julie, as well, and Stephen. I'll stop the recording.